start, and we're really excited about having Larry Morris this morning with us. And he's been a pastor for many years, and recently moved over to the east side of the state, and he was known as the poet pastor over on the other side of the mountains. And he is married recently a good friend of mine, Cheryl Coolis, and he's shared some of his books with me, and I really appreciate his friendship. That's been a pretty instant type of friendship. And this morning we're going to be doing listening to some of his readings, and I'm excited this morning. Oh, and by the way, we didn't plan the shirt, the wardrobe coordination, but I like his thinking because he recently was to Maui, right?
Right.
And I'm going to Maui next month. So we're all on the same wavelength, and so this morning, enjoy.
So we'll start with just a couple, so you get a feel of what I write. I write poetry and really short stories. I'll read two of them. The first one is called I Shall Dwell in the House of the Lord Forever. I wrote this as a way to try and capture the power of what I think is one of the best known passages in the Bible, and you'll pick that up as I read it. I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. When Kristen was an infant, her grandma took care of her some days. At nap time, Grandma would rock her slowly back and forth and would gently whisper the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." By the time she finished, Kristen slept. When Kristen was 5, her parents worked evenings, so Grandma would put her to bed at night. Grandma would sit on the edge of the bed, hold her hand, and quietly say the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures." Sometimes Grandma would stop before the end because she thought Kristen had fallen asleep. Kristen would then whisper, "More, more." Grandma would finish, and Kristen slept. When Kristen was a senior in college, her mother called and told her that Grandma's cancer was inoperable, that they had moved her to hospice, and that she wouldn't live long. Kristen flew home that day and went immediately to see Grandma. As she stood at the side of the bed, Grandma's breathing was heavy and her eyes were closed. Kristen had tears and didn't quite know what to say. Finally, she took Grandma's hand and said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." When she got to the verse, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," she stopped and had more tears. When Kristen paused, Grandma whispered, "More, more." Kristen's mother took Grandma's other hand, and together the two women prayed, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." When they finished, all three women whispered, "Forever, forever," and Grandma slept. A second one that we'll begin with is a psalm. A number of things I've written, I call psalms because they're prayers and they're really written in the form of what I think of a psalm. This is called the Psalm of Prayer, Hear My Heart. Lord, there are prayers that are too personal, too deep, too hidden to pray. I would feel too exposed, too vulnerable to pray them out loud, or even to pray them silently. I want to pray with my whole heart, but sometimes it is too hard. Listen, Lord, beneath my words, beneath my thoughts, and simply hear my heart. Someday I will find the words and we will talk. Till then, hear my heart, Lord. Hear my heart.
I've got it as hives.
It might be a good idea if you can mute. I'm not sure on our side if we can mute, but we can hear
Yeah.
people. But we'll have a time for questions too here just shortly. So thank you.
We need to get on.
Move that.
There's a little lower on the little lower left corner, there's a mute button. So if you can do that, that's great. And then we'll do questions here shortly.
One of the things we talked about, Joel, was sort of a question about how I started writing.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd read the first thing that I wrote. I wrote this after my father died about 13 or 14 years ago. About him, a way to help me grieve. It had been a number of months and I just felt like I needed to do something different. And so I wrote this. It talks about his love for the land. He grew up on a farm, and after us 5 kids moved away, they moved back to the farm my mom grew up on. This is called Fields of Earth, Field of Love. The ground, the earth, dirt, acreage, the fields are its names. My home sits on it. Our roads lie across it. It is one of life's dimensions. For a century, my family is planted in it and harvested on it. It has provided them with sustenance and life. Labor has been given to it, and its fruits have been received with relief and thanks. From it, corn and soybeans, hay and alfalfa, apples and pears, beans and tomatoes, watermelons and cantaloupe, cherries and peas have been grown and eaten and sold and enjoyed. Beauty is seen in the growth on its acres. The tassels of corn and leaves of soybeans sway in the wind and tickle the heart.
Back to your
Some of its
email.
produce is given only for joy. Marigolds, petunias, tulips, impatiens, gladiolas, geraniums, and lobelia, to name a few. Now it is a home for my father. It is a blanket to hold him safe until we all live as joy forever in God's field of love.
So that was one of the first poems that you wrote.
That was the very first, and I just remember whenever I read it, it reminds me of my dad, Ralph, who loved the flatlands of Illinois, where I grew up. Yeah,
Cool. I grew up in Iowa, so I can relate to Illinois. So
that's good.
cool. Also, you also wrote about caregiving and grief after some losses in your life. Can you share some about that and read some of those writings if you feel comfortable to do that?
Yeah, let me read a few of those. This first one is kind of fun. My first wife died just over 2 years ago. She had ovarian cancer. She was diagnosed 5 years before she died. And so that journey of with her toward death and hope and giving up hope and all of that stuff. This one is called Eggs and Bums. Yes, bums. The eggs are frying, the vegetables are steaming, and the juice is poured. Breakfast is nearly done, and she and I are laughing and bumping bums next to the stove to the beat of Billy Joel. She is 6 weeks into her 3rd round of chemotherapy, a strong brew of chemicals that targets the cancer and drains her energy by early evening. But in the early morning, as the sun comes up and the day begins, we're smiling and dancing, bumping bums in the kitchen, laughing at the silly things, and still in love. Another one about letters that the grief is still there, about letters she was writing to me and to our son.
Is mine on? Is that on, Linda?
Letters, it's one of the things that's encouraged to folks who are possibly at least in the process of dying is to write letters to those who you love. This is entitled Letters. She's writing letters. One of them is to me, and others to our son, and a few more are to our other dear friends. She doesn't have to write letters. We could just talk, and we do a lot. But these letters are for later, after she's gone, after the end. You see, she has cancer. She may yet make it, we hope. She may survive for years, we pray. And if she does make it, perhaps we will then burn those letters. But she may not survive, that is. So for now, she writes me a letter that I hope I never have a chance to open.
So this is from your latest book, correct? Because you have 3 books and you have one on the way.
Right.
And this
Right.
one is the most recent.
You're right. This is called A Beautiful and Painful Journey. You can either get it from me or most of my books are on Amazon
Okay.
as well. I'll read another one from this, maybe 2 more from this book. This is called How Are You? It's a question that we ask everybody. We ask each other all the time. And I'm in a grief group, and we've talked about how we struggle with this question. And this gets at what some of that struggle is about. How are you? A caregiver's perspective. When your partner has cancer, stage 4 out of 4, and might be dying, when she is fighting for her life and you feel abandoned and then you feel selfish. When you're driving to work and you sob and you look for a place to pull off the freeway. When a friend tells you your spouse is strong and she's a good person and she'll make it, and you tell her, I know saints that didn't make it, and she looks at you with watery eyes and whispers, me too. When the treatment she chooses are not the treatment you would choose, but you support her doing the choosing. When a friend tells you he loves you and you only have tears in return for his gift. When she is really tired and fatigued and sick and yells and swears at the world, and she really does want it all to change and you can't fix it, and you listen and listen and listen. When you go to work and have deadlines and schedules and you realize you don't care about them, not like you used to. When friends come over for a meal and games and you talk about regular concerns like refrigerators and recipes, and you realize that they gave you a gift of 3 cancer-free hours. When her healing routines become routine and you can pretend that nothing is wrong anymore, and you realize she can't pretend. When a friend tells you that for the 4 months since they have heard about her cancer, they've had a candle burning all day, every day, and you feel their love so deeply. When your job and your life are about making decisions and you're good at it and people count on you and you just can't do it as quickly as before. When you really, really don't want to ask, but you feel like you really, really have to ask, is that treatment covered? And how much will it cost? When friends bring a meal and you want to say, we don't need it, but instead you say thanks, and while you were eating, you realize how much you need it. When you think about retirement and you wonder who will be there. And then when someone asks you, how are you? What do you say? Dear friends, don't stop asking, how are you? Just give me time to begin to decide where to begin.
I like that.
I'm guessing that some of you who are listening have been in that experience of being a caregiver and feeling overwhelmed and feeling just lots of emotions and lots of demands and feeling glad that you can do those things. Um, and still, it's a struggle. One of the writings that was included in that I included in the book that I almost took out.
Can you hear it?
But my new wife Cheryl said, "No, I read this to my caregiving groups." She used to do caregiving groups, and she would read this to them. And she said, whenever I read it, I couldn't look them in the eyes because they would all be crying while I read this. And then after it was over, we would stop and talk about their experiences, and it was a great encouragement for them to share what their life was like too. So I'll read this one. This is for those of you who have been caregivers or know others who are in that circumstance. Caregivers are those people. They have taken on a job they didn't sign up for. They have taken on a life that was handed to them, an exhausting, painful, frustrating, draining life that is at times deep and beautiful. And in the end, they wouldn't miss a moment of it. They give up sleep to be with their loved one who can't sleep. When they do sleep, they wake wondering what happened while I was sleeping. What did I miss? They cut back on work or give it up or do it all, and the ends don't meet. They go to appointments and listen to doctors who can only give possibilities, or this might help, or they hear it's our best option, or it's really the only option. Then they help make difficult decisions, sometimes life and death treatment decisions, with a person who is too drugged or too tired or too young to make it on their own. Treatment decisions that may cause pain in order to bring healing. At least that is what they hope. They get food and make food and heat it up again or wait for it to cool. They get water and juice and supplements and prescriptions and paper towels and regular towels and crackers and snacks and another pillow and clothes and pajamas and head coverings. They turn the heat up and then down. They open and close windows. They set up medical supplies and order more. They clean up and dispose of waste and cut food into smaller pieces and then feed their loved one, and on and on. And they listen as their loved one is hopeful, even when they, as caregivers, aren't. They listen to the exhaustion and the pain and the anger when their loved one is out of hope and is flailing. And they ride the roller coaster of their own emotions, knowing that no matter how they are feeling, they have a job to do. They have someone they love who is depending on them. As they laugh with their loved one and they cry alone and together. And they talk of hope and they begin to say goodbye. And they hold and touch and sit in quiet as their loved one finally sleeps. Those people, caregivers, are those people.
That one, that's amazing. I totally relate to that because many, many years ago, I promised my grandmother she would never go to a nursing home.
Mm.
And little did I know what that entailed. And so I quit my job in Georgia, moved back to Iowa, and took care of her for several years. She was still pastoring a church at 83. And I don't regret doing that.
Mhm.
But I will say it was probably one of the darkest points of my life because our roles completely reversed. I became the parent and she became the
Right.
child. And that was very difficult because she was always she was a leader and
Right.
she was very disciplined and she loved the Lord. And, so that caregiving, I was 25.
Mhm.
And it made me realize, I'm like, how do people be caregivers at 65, 75, 85, caring for their spouses. And, it takes a special person. That was my first experience ever with hospice, was
Mhm.
when my grandmother did come to the end, and it was great because they were able to explain to me the dying process.
Right.
And I was with my grandmother and several other family members when she passed away. And, I really feel like going through that process of being a caregiver has made me what I am today.
Right.
It built who I am,
It changes us.
it does.
Really does.
It
Yeah.
does. And you have more compassion and
Yes.
you realize, you weren't alone. I think that's one of the things with caregiving is a lot of times you feel alone
Mhm.
and you're frustrated because things are totally different, just like the roles reversed. So
And there's the opportunity in caregiving and in grief to realize, to experience love and compassion that goes so much deeper than we normally experience. Yeah.
that was the only person I was ever with when they passed away.
Mm.
And there's no amount of money that could ever replace that feeling that I felt with her when she passed away.
Mm.
So
I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
moving for you. That's a good transition into me reading a few that I read after Suzanne died.
Okay.
I'm guessing some of you, most of us, have experienced or are experiencing grief around those who were close to us, who have passed away. This is one that I wrote a couple of weeks after Suzanne died. It's called Free Now. She is free of the struggle now, the exhaustion, the pain, the weakness, and the difficulty breathing. She is free from the fluid in her belly and in the sacs around her lungs, and the burning neuropathy in her feet, and the nausea and the throwing up. She is free from the drugs and the supplements and the chemotherapy and the immunotherapy and the infusions and the injections and the blood draws and the tests. She is free from the roller coaster of emotions and the frustration and the anger and the struggle to hope. She is free from all of that. And I am glad for her. And I am free too. I am free from the intensity of caregiving, free from the demands of the cancer, from the steady work of keeping her comfortable and alive, from the hyper alertness at home and at work and in all of the places in between. I am free from the frustration and the fear and the helplessness and the roller coaster of joy and anger and the passion of it all. Free from juggling 3 things at a time and then 10 things and then losing count. Free from the fear of the unknown. Free from the restless sleep, wondering how she is now, or now, and wondering if she would be alive when I woke up. Free from being careful to not wake her, or from wondering, is she sleeping too long? Should I wake her? Free from trying to decide with her the right treatment that might keep her alive, or to help her decide if she should end it all. I'm free from all of that. Yes, I am grateful for her freedom, but I have mixed feelings about mine. The price was so high. Grief is about loss. And it's also about starting over. So I'll read this one. It's called The Story of First. And these will be in the ones I read earlier from the book on caregiving. These will be in the book on grief. The story of grief is the story of doing things you have done for years, but doing them for the first time all over again. It's the first time you call your son, who you have called many times, but this time you tell him that she has died. And you feel so close and so far away. The first time you see your siblings after she died, and they hug you like like you've never been hugged, and you cry together. The first time you see your dear friends and they share in your grief and you share in theirs. The first morning you wake up and it hits you, she will never wake up with you again. The first time you come home from work and she isn't there and she isn't on her way. The first time you have friends over to the house and you are the only host. The first time you make food and you realize it is too much because there is only one eating. The first time you go to worship and you walk to the front for communion and it hits you, she is not in front or behind you. The first time you choose a movie and you can watch whatever you want, it takes you a while to figure out what it is. The story of grief is the story about doing things you have done for years, but doing them for the first time, all over again, and then for the second time, and then the third, until you stop counting, but you hope you never stop remembering. Starting over.
I bet you have many memories of while you were pastoring and probably dealing with a spouse, a married couple one of them had passed away, been married for 60, 50 years. And I mean, first of all, death isn't easy for anybody to deal with. Everybody has their own way of dealing with death. But can you share one of the memories of maybe one of the first ones that, I mean, as far as how you dealt with it, and, because I know that you couldn't always been a superhero dealing with grief, and that's difficult to say, but, I mean, this is amazing to me because, death is not something that we like to talk about.
Right.
And, for some it's depressing. But actually, like in my grandmother's case, it was her next step, going into the next room and doing what she'd worked for all of her life, And one of her favorite songs was "I've Got a Mansion Over the Hilltop," and I think of that song often. Whenever I hear that song, I automatically think of my grandmother. But when I think of her, I think of what she did and how she affected my life. And that's all part of the life process, is that experience.
And we get to a place where those memories become joyful most of the time. And so those people become the gift that they always were, but in a new way. And most of the time they're good and sometimes funny memories. You asked about a couple who I walked with in that process. Bill and Rose, and I interned down in Boardman, Oregon. And when I arrived there, Rose was near death. She died 2 months later. And really most of ministry with folks who are close to death is listening to them telling their stories. And they were both in their 70s. I think they'd only been married 10 or 12 years, but they were clearly soulmates. And Rose didn't have a lot of energy. Bill just told me story after story. And then even after Rose died, I would continue to go over and visit. He would tell me fun, and we would begin to laugh. Good sort of stuff. This is a funny story about Suzanne and I, and after she died. It's called Talking with Her. I still talk with her. She died nearly 2 months ago, but I still talk with her. It's not as crazy as you think. Well, okay, maybe it is that crazy, but I'm not the only crazy one. Lots of grieving people talk to the loved one they have lost. It's reassuring at times. It's familiar and usually comforting. Sometimes it's funny and I laugh out loud. The only time it bothers me is when I still lose the argument. Yeah. She was smarter than I was. It never helped in the relationship. It took me a while to
Did you admit that?
Admit that.
Did you admit that when she was still living, though?
I did, but it took me years. Yeah. We'd been married 38 years when she died.
Wow.
And it was only about 5 weeks later was our 39th anniversary. And on our anniversary, I put her ashes in Puget Sound.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of meaning for that to me. One more that I'll read around Suzanne and my experience after she died. And it's partly about encouraging those of you who have a friend who's grieving to reach out weeks after the death. This is called Just Exactly the Right Time. In the first couple of weeks after she died, I received cards of support and love from so many people. It was a wonderful experience of feeling overwhelmed in the best way. It's been nearly 3 months now. The memorial service seems long ago. Having the extended family fill my house for a week or so with tears and silliness was wonderful, and I miss them all. We have distributed her ashes, and life is beginning to move on. And then just this week, I received 2 more cards from people sharing their loss and praying, sharing their love and praying for my loss. At first, the cards seemed late, but as I held them, I felt the love of the senders even before I opened them. I knew that they had come at just exactly the right time. I was really beginning to feel like the world was moving on. All the regular activities were starting up again as if nothing had changed. Well, the world is moving on, and I am too, but that doesn't mean she is forgotten. Those 2 cards that seemed to be late came at exactly the right time to remind me that we can move on and still not forget. I've also found in grief that it's important when friends, it's meaningful to me when my friends say that Suzanne's name. There's something that says to me that she's remembered. Your grandma's name was
Delilah.
Delilah.
Mhm.
Yeah, isn't it? I just think it's delightful when people say that. What a wonderful name.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Biblical.
yeah. There's that too. 2019 was a hard year for me. Suzanne died in July of that year. And that was a loss that I had anticipated. And sometimes therapists will call that anticipatory grief. I know that experience. And a couple months later, I had a sudden grief. And my 25-year-old son died unexpectedly in November of the same year. And that grief is still very personal. And some of you, I'm guessing, have experienced that sort of sudden grief as well. And there's a couple that I would like to read my experience of that. The first one is simply called "Oh No." It has been 3 days since I heard he died. 3 long time-stopping days. I've talked with close family and a few dear friends, my pastors, my therapist, and each has uttered the same exact words, the chorus of my life. Oh no. It has been 3 timeless, eternal days, and there is now a small rip in the cocoon. I hear the quiet, almost inaudible whisper, it's time to cry now. And so I do. Quiet rivers of tears falling to the floor, surrounding me, as if I will drown in them. And then loud, sobbing, life engulfing tears. He's gone. He's really gone. Oh no. No, no, no. I've had people say that that shock is sometimes a gift, that it keeps us from completely falling apart. And those first couple days, I just needed time to live with the shock of the news. And feelings came, but not at first. The shock was really quite sudden. And if you've known that, you might know that experience. A lot of my writing comes out of my personal experience and things that people say to me, or that sort of thing. And this is in that, I think I wrote this in the first week. I went over to the store, the grocery store, and I ran into a friend. More than you will ever know. With tears in her eyes, she said, "It is good to see your face, my friend. You have more people praying for you than you will ever know." We hugged, and then she had to go. Grace is an ongoing story, more than you can ever imagine. Love is a never-ending gift of more than you will ever know. Experiencing that kind of grace and simply glancing pieces of that love coming in my direction allows me to breathe a bit, holds me in this awful pain, sits with me in this darkest valley, and whispers so softly the words of Jesus, "Fear not, I am with you always, more than you will ever know." One of the things that you experience in grief that is close to you, especially, is you lose sense of what time it is, what day it is. And so I wrote this after Gabe died. Gabe was my son. What day is it? I really don't know. Did my son die this past week, or was it 2 weeks ago? Was the memorial service just a few days ago, or a week? When the family came, were they here overnight, or was it 4 days or 5 days? I remember the meals with them, the times talking around the living room, the talks in the car, the walking in the woods, the memorial service, and the gathering at the house, the night out for pizza, but it all went by so fast. Did I take them to the airport this morning, or was it yesterday? Does someone know? This is my journey with grief. I've lost my internal calendar. So I make lists and I write deadlines. I check them against yesterday's list to see what I've missed. When I get up in the morning, I check the calendar and then walk away and forget what day it is anyway. What I do remember clearly are the deep conversations with friends and the people who have hugged me and said, "I love you," and the people who have simply cried with me, and the surprise encounters with people who knew my son and loved him and speak his name out loud. For now, those wonderful connections are how I orientate my disoriented life. Those beautiful encounters are how I mark my time. They are, in some ways, the most beautiful calendar I have ever had. So that's a sample of what I write. The caregiving stuff and the grief work is emotional stuff. But my real hope in publishing it isn't that people will join me in my grief, but it will help you. It will help you to experience your own grief and find another light through, another way through. And so there's one more that I'd like to end with, and it ends in the benediction, and it would be a good place. And then I'll, before I do that, let me share that my wife, Cheryl, and I are available in the Tri-Cities and sort of surrounding area to do workshops and presentations on grief and caregiving. And my books, A Beautiful and Painful Journey, Flirting with a Mystery are available on Amazon. And my first book, Among Us, which the first thing I read from is in this book. You have to get that from me, so we can figure out a way if you're interested. The last thing I wanted to mention was that Cheryl is a part of a group that's doing a full day retreat here in the Tri-Cities on August 21st called Through Grief to Peace. If you're interested, get hold of Joel and we'll get you the contact information for that. I'll read this and then you may have a few closing words.
Okay.
This is called Waiting for Hope to be Born. They've left now. They came to remember and grieve my son's death and to hug me and share their stories and listen to mine and cry with me and tell me it's not my fault and tell me they're only a phone call away and invite me to visit soon and to tell me over and over that I am loved. And they did tell me, and I am loved. And they went with me as we attended to the details that needed to be attending to, the memorial service planning, the cremation paperwork and death certificate, his apartment and all the things, and the beginning of all the other paperwork. And now they have all gone home to their work and their lives. I need to sleep. I need time to let the shock wear off a bit more. I need to fall apart and come back together. I need to cry at unexpected times and be okay with not crying at other times. I need to share the stories with my grief group and my friends and with myself. I need to step into the future and back into the past and be fully present in the present. I need to be kind to myself and breathe. And through it all, I need the holy words spoken since ancient times, the words that have echoed in my life week after week, the words that carry me now as I wait for hope to be born. These words: the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace.
Our time together today kind of reminds me, just recently I was at a conference down in Houston, and somebody lived there that I knew. Her and her husband had pastored me back in Iowa when I was about 18, and probably he was one of the most instrumental persons in my life. The one thing I'll never forget that when he first moved to that church to start pastoring there, they were probably in their early 30s. They had a little daughter, and I remember one of the things that he taught us was how to take notes during the sermon. And you think, oh, well, that's, that stuck with me. And many years fast forward, they moved several different places, and in probably about 95, 96, they were pastoring a church in Tucson, Arizona. And I hadn't seen them for quite a while, so I took a trip down there and visited with them. And he was the type of person he was. I describe him as a shepherd. And to me, I always trusted him, and I always knew if I had a question, he would be able to give me the perfect answer. You're always looking for that perfect answer. And his wife was very supportive. She was great. I love her. And anyway, it was probably about 6 months after I did that visit, he passed away, and he was only 48. But and then fast forward, she moved to Houston, and I hadn't seen her for many, many years. I was friends with her on Facebook, and I had gone to a prayer breakfast at this conference in Houston. And one of the things there was 3 different things, and I can only remember one of the 3, but it was like, if you feel prompted to do something, you need to do it. And so that morning, it was a Thursday morning, and there were going to be a big awards dinner that night in the conference. And it just popped on my heart that I need to get in contact with her. And I kept on thinking, no, I should have done it last week. I could have prepared something, And so I was messaging her and I said, she's like, well, health wise, I really can't make it down there to pick you up. And I'm like, okay, well, do you have some time this afternoon? So I got an Uber, went out there, and spent time reminiscing, going back,
Right.
and her daughter came over, which was awesome. Michelle's Mickey. And we sat there and talked, and we had so many good memories, and they were new in the ministry, I believe, at that point, and it was just amazing. And I there was a reason that I was prompted, and I didn't realize. And what happened was, it was his birthday that day.
Oh my.
And she told me, she's like, I didn't know how I was going to get through it. And, I mean, it was just a small little thing for me to go get the Uber right up there. And then, it brought tears to my eyes because it was, she loved that man and she still loves that man. And he had a great effect on many people's lives. And,
oh, that's
you
real.
know,
That's real
just-
life right there.
just being able to give back and and I never knew any of that, that it was his birthday.
Mhm.
And that's the amazing thing about God, that he can, it's just a little prompt. And if I
Right.
wouldn't have followed through with that, I would have gone to that boring award banquet, which I don't like big groups anyway, but to me that was worth the whole trip.
Mhm.
It really was. And it was where I was supposed to be at that time.
Thanks for sharing that.
So-
That's beautiful.
And she still has an amazing effect on my life.
And that
I'm telling you.
encourages us to pay attention to those prompts. Yeah,
Definitely.
right.
It would have been so easy to overlook that. And it's not like like a superhero or anything like that, but
That's right.
just saying one little thing and making one little action can change people's lives. And that's the thing I feel about dealing with death. Because I was raised in a church atmosphere, my grandmother was a minister for 60 years. It wasn't something I ever, I guess, bothered me. And we had friends that owned funeral homes.
Mhm.
So I was around death, and it's not like something that I enjoyed going to,
Right.
but I really feel like that I've been able to help people, when a lot of people shy away
Mhm.
because they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing or do the
Right.
wrong thing. And I don't really feel, when you read about the cars getting them,
Mhm.
they weren't late. They were
Right,
perfectly timed.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think that if we let us be prompted and just let people know that you're there,
Right.
it's not like you want some big confession. It's just that letting people know that you're there.
And often you don't have to have grand words. It's
Mhm.
just listening to their story and telling them they're still loved
Mhm.
and they're loved and naming their loved one. What a beautiful gift, Delilah.
Delilah.
Yeah.
Yep. When she
Yeah.
passed away, even her sister didn't realize her first name was Zelma. And so we had on our tombstone, we put Z Delilah Leaper. And I just got that. I thought that was hilarious that her own sister didn't know that her first name was Zelma. So, but yeah. And experiences like that, my grandmother she loved to study the Bible. And the best memory ever was when I graduated from college. We took a trip to the Holy Land, and she experienced everything she had ever read about. And on the Sea of Galilee, it was just amazing. I was baptized in the River Jordan, but anyway,
Thanks for the invitation,
yeah,
Joe.
I'm glad
this
you
has been
came.
great.
I
Yeah.
just, I'm not the best speaker, and I wasn't really sure how I would do. This was amazing. I appreciate your time. It's just fantastic.
Great.
So,
All right.
cool.
And there's a couple comments. I don't know. If
Oh,
you wanted
okay,
to
sure.
open it up to comments or questions. but
yeah.
This is from Helga.
Thank you, Helga. I just read those words. Yeah, how can the words take us so deep? But they can. They really can. And I know you know that in your ministry as well.
Hi, Larry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you were able to find the time this morning. That's
Yeah.
great.
No. It's just that I want to cry all the time while you're reading. And I haven't even had the experience of a profoundly close person dying. It's just that I can imagine it, and it's just so powerful, and it prepares me for the future because I know it's all coming. And
Well,
Let them be on that picture, because they're the ones who have
I don't know how you managed that. Your words just take us there
you want to say something?
Yeah.
in such a real way. It's I don't know the power of what you write.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks, Helga. Can I tell people that you're the pastor at Pasco First Lutheran?
Yes, you can.
All right.
He just
I-
did.
I just did. And I appreciate your ministry there too. That yeah. Thank you for your kind words. Yeah.
All right.
Dick, you want to say something?
put his picture.
Any other comments or?
Thank you so much. We appreciate your reading and your books.
All right.
Thank you.
Good. All right.
Yes,
Thanks again.
thank-
Maybe we'll do this again. But
Yeah, never tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Larry.
All right. Is that Dick?
I would like us to do this again, and I'd like to expand the circle if that's
Yes.
okay.
Well,
Yeah,
let's
that'd be
look-
awesome.
Let's look for a way to do that.
Yep. Cool.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate
Thanks
your
for
time.
coordinating it.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you,
Oh,
Joe.
you're welcome. Thank you,
Okay.
John. He's
And
the guy.
Josh, yeah.
All right.
All
Thanks.
right.
God bless.
Bye bye.